Hello everyone. In this chapter we're going to talk about safety and environmental issues. Now this is a very small section of the A+ exam, but it is something that you need to be aware of. So I kind of want to go over these slides and make sure that you know the questions that you might get out of this section. Most of them are pretty common sense, and any of you that have worked in any sort of industrial environment at any point in time are going to have already been familiar with some of these terms. But if you haven't, we'll go over them so that you'll know about them. So we're going to talk about recycling and disposal issues. We'll talk about using a material safety data sheet or an MSDS sheet. We're going to talk about electrostatic discharge, which we've talked about before. We'll talk about some of the hazards you need to be aware of, what to do if there's an environmental accident. So there is a sheet called an MSDS, and it stands for Material Safety Data Sheet. And things that you find on this sheet are what to do, how to store something, safe disposal of things, what to do if there's a fire involving this material. And these are common sheets that you find in industrial settings for different chemicals that might be in use in that particular environment. And there are 16 different sections of the MSDS. But for the most part, a lot of them are dealing with things that you're not going to have to be worried about in this class. The big things that you would want to look is, it's going to tell you the firefighting equipment, what type of fire extinguisher you have to use on it. And then there's also a first aid measure so that if you've accidentally gotten it in your eye or, based on what the chemical is, even on your skin, what to do. This is an example of an MSDS sheet. And their graphic is not very clear here. Since their graphic's not very clear, I found one on the internet just to pull up to show you kind of what they look like. This is one for Clorox bleach. Regular bleach, it tells you at the top the product, who distributes it. There is an emergency telephone number that, in this case, Clorox runs in case there's a bleach problem. It gives you a description of the product. Interestingly enough, they say that Clorox bleach has a chlorine odor. But if you look down through this, you see it gives some information on what the ingredients in it are, special precautions. There's a section down here at the bottom on waste disposal. Reactivity and physical, those won't matter so much for you, but you see that they're on there. And then a section on fire and explosion data. So Clorox specifically, you see here, has no flash point, and you don't need any special firefighting procedures to deal with it. In addition to knowing about MSDS, something else you need to be aware of is that you can't just throw everything away, especially some of the older equipment. Some batteries, especially old batteries, have mercury in them, and mercury can lead to memory loss and vision impairments. Newer batteries don't contain mercury, but they still have some environmentally damaging chemicals in them. So you are technically not supposed to throw a battery in the trash can. I know that some of you, and I've done it myself unfortunately, will forget about that and throw batteries from remote controls and things in the trash. But you should take it to a recycling center. You can also do that same thing with toner and print cartridges. In fact, some toner cartridges, if you send them back, you might get a deposit back. You might get some money from the manufacturer. If that's not the case, though, or if you don't want to mess with that, something that I've started doing with old batteries and toner cartridges and everything, I go to Best Buy a lot, for better or worse. And in front of Best Buy, as you walk in the door, there are several trash cans. And there's one for old telephones, there's one for batteries, there's one for toner, and there's one for inkjet. So I will just take my old cartridges for things there And that way I know they're disposed of properly. And Best Buy doesn't charge you anything for it. You don't make any money off of it, but you don't lose anything off of it either. So check the MSDS sheet if you're not sure about if you can just throw something in the trash can or not. Some chemicals, especially some cleaning solvents that you might use, will tell you that you need to do something special before you can throw them away. With old computers, if they're working, something you can do is donate them to charity. I think that's a great thing if you've got old machines and you can do that. Unfortunately, the state of Louisiana will not let us do that, and it upsets me greatly because I know there are local schools here, or churches or things that we could give those old computers to that they could be useful in. If you're going to donate a computer to charity, one thing that you should make sure you do is, erase everything off the hard drive. Use one of those data destruction utilities we talked about last time, and go in and make sure you've gotten all your data off of there. Some organizations will specialize in recycling for profit. I don't know of any in Shreveport, but there might be some. And in larger cities, what you find is that there are companies that will, pay you a little bit and take your machine and recycle it. Or you may find a nonprofit that's willing to take your machine and delete everything off of it to recycle it. Again, on here they mention what I just said: hard drives need to be formatted or destroyed because sensitive data can be retrieved from a non-working drive. So we've talked about electrostatic discharge before. I just want to mention it again to make sure that everyone remembers about it. Different entities contain differences in statically stored voltages. When those entities come in contact, the voltage is equalized. That's their nice way of saying, when you've rubbed your foot across the carpet and then you touch somebody, the voltage equalizes, and that's when they get a shock. It's especially important when you're handling memory chips. Be careful because they are affected by very low voltages. So make sure that you either wear a wrist strap or ground yourself in some way. Touch the side of the case while it's grounded, the metal part of the case. Those are important things to remember, important safety features, or safety things you should remember to do. So, important things about electronics, make sure that you keep some things around and know when and where to use them. Keep electrical tape around. A little roll of black tape is cheap. It's a great thing to put in your toolkit. You might want to keep an AC outlet tester around. I keep a battery tester nearby. That's always nice to have. If you're going to do some more intensive repair, you might want to get an ohm meter, an AC/DC meter. And then again, an ESD wrist strap with an alligator clip. And the alligator clip is shown here. It's number 5. That's the clip you would clip to something that was grounded. They're going to clip it to the case, which is touching the power supply, which was grounded. So that'll ground everything out. Always remember to put your expansion cards in anesthetic bags when you take them out of a machine, or if you're putting them up for storage. Try to never touch the chips. Hold expansion cards by the bracket. Never hold them by the connectors on the bottom. If you're doing a lot of work in this, something you can do is wear natural fibers. They also make an anesthetic spray. If you are forced to work in an area with carpeting, you can spray the anesthetic spray on some of the floors. And then you can also keep anesthetic cleaning wipes around and use those to clean your keyboards and monitors and things like that. And one thing that they want to point out here, when you're cleaning a monitor, and I'm bad about this and I'm trying to get out of this habit because I know it's not a good thing to do. Don't spray the monitor itself. If you're cleaning it with Windex or whatever, spray down the cloth and then wipe the monitor down. instead of actually spraying the monitor itself. Something that I've started doing that's a whole lot easier, they make these wipes now that are designed to clean electronic components. And they've already got cleaner on them, so you can just get one of those and wipe down your monitor, keyboard, or whatever. And that makes it a lot easier than even messing with liquid cleaner. So when you're storing equipment, the goal is to eliminate the possibility of electrostatic discharge. So use those anesthetic bags. If you're going to ship something, they make anesthetic bubble wrap you can ship it in. Use the boxes to prevent physical damage. This is one place that I think it's okay to hoard boxes. I keep the boxes that most of my components come in, especially for 2 or 3 months after I got the component, because most of the boxes are designed for those components to fit in perfectly. And by keeping it, if you do have a problem with your component, you can always send it back. A good example, hard drives, these are the little ends that come on the ends of hard drives. And keeping some things like that around so that if you do have a bad hard drive in your machine that's still under warranty, you can put it back in those to ship it, is a great idea. And then as far as environment, a cool, dry environment is the best place to store things if that's available to you. So there are lots of things that have high voltage. Printers have a power supply in the fusing process that is high voltage. Power supplies, generally, you don't want to work on at all. The capacitors in a power supply can be fatal. And these days, power supplies are cheap, so if there's a problem with the power supply, just replace it. If you're going to work on a monitor, especially a CRT, that's the old big monitors, they have lots of voltage stored in the capacitors. Don't service those without certified training. If you're going to be one that works on monitors, you need to go through the process of actually getting certified to work on those types of devices. Nowadays, in most cases, what's going to happen in reality is if there is still a CRT and it goes out, what you're going to do is pull it out and replace it with an LCD. So other things, make sure the computer's actually off. The computer might be in a sleep mode where it has gone down to one of those S states we talked about, and it looks off, but it's not actually off. And if that's the case, you open it up and start to pull a card out, it's going to get you. Here they are showing the process of discharging a CRT monitor. I have never done this and don't ever plan to try to do this, but basically you take a screwdriver with a rubber handle on it and you touch the middle of the back of the monitor with it open with the alligator clip connected to the screwdriver and then ground it out into the monitor. So other hazards to be aware of, based on what type of printer it is, it might have a mechanical device. If you're going to work on a dot matrix printer, for example, turn it off, otherwise somebody may send a print job and that print head will run over there and get you. Watch for hazards on the floor, especially if you are in an environment that is changing. If you're in a network room and there's a big network project going on, they may have a drop floor, but temporarily they may have cables run all over the floor, so look for those. Watch for liquids. Liquids are generally bad in any environment like that. But you may have liquids for cleaning, so make sure you're aware of those and try to not knock them over. Look for situational hazards like unsafe temporary equipment. Also look for atmospheric hazards, such as those created by a room of cleaners, or if you are dealing with a big server room, something you've really got to worry about, it may be an old halon system. Halon is a type of fire suppressant system, and you are not allowed to build these anymore, but if you have one, until you discharge it, you can keep it. And what halon does is when the fire sensors are triggered, it's a chemical that takes all of the air out of the room. So it sort of takes your fire, it takes the oxygen away from the fire, so it kills the fire. But it doesn't drop water on any of your equipment. It was great for electronic fires because it'll shut everything down without water. But there are some environmental concerns because it gets into the ozone, I think was the problem. It goes up and depletes the ozone. So they won't let you refill those, but you may have one. We had one of those at LSUS, and the halon tank was actually right next to my office, which always scared me a little bit. You know, they always warned us, if you hear that fire thing go off, run, because you're going to be out of air very soon. And other things, just be careful moving heavy equipment. Generally, you know, based on what your job is, you might not be moving anything bigger than just a server, but some servers weigh 60, 70 pounds or more. You know, or if you're asked to move a UPS, the battery may be very heavy. So, mechanical hazards, we mentioned some of these. Impact and inkjet printers can crush your fingers when they move. Remember, impact is just another name for a dot matrix printer. CD and DVD trays, they can close on your fingers. The pins in serial parallel VGI and DVI connectors can cause puncture wounds. I think you'd have to push pretty hard to get a puncture wound from a cable, but it's possible. The sharp edges on cases can cause cuts. Now, that's happened to me before. So just kind of be careful, you know, with those. So other things, one of the biggest problems in, you know, especially in a big environment is cables. You got to deal with cables running everywhere. The preference is, of course, to have a drop floor or drop ceiling and run everything in one of those if it's possible. But that's not always something you can do. So cable ties can be a good friend. You can tie everything up and make it as nice as possible. Then you can take some duct tape or gaffer's tape. If the run's going to be across the floor temporarily, you can put that tape over it. One thing people will suggest is get a real bright colored tape that's very contrasting to what the color of the floor is. Like if you're doing a trade show and the room is has red carpet, you might want to get yellow and black tape that'll really stick out so people will notice it's there. Other things you can do for permanent installations is cable management systems. And these are things that run up the back of a server, and they'll run down and you'll put all of your cable equipment in it. Alright, other things to be aware of, which they put under situational hazards, but an important one here is observe load limits. Don't use shipping boxes as temporary workbenches, they say. You know, if you're working on a piece of equipment, make sure that the table you've put it on can handle it. Something that I'll add to load limits here that really doesn't quite fit here, but something you should be sure of as an A+ person to be aware of. Find out the voltage or the amperage limits on each of your circuits that your equipment's plugged into, so that if you're plugging more equipment in, you know that you're not going to overload it. Do not, you know, for under-engineered building supports, you know, make sure that if you've got a large rack mount, they put extra support in to handle that. Use a step stool, don't use a chair. That's pretty common sense, but we all kind of have used chairs here and there, so be careful with that. Avoid tripping hazards. This can be a legal exposure issue. That is very true. If you created, you know, if you put the cable on the floor and somebody walks in and they fall on it, and you've been contracted out, you know, you might end up in court because you're the one that created that problem. And then atmospheric. Here they mention halon that I talked about earlier. So if halon's gone off, get out of an area. Alright, so heavy equipment hazards are something to be aware of. And things you can do is try to move equipment in its original cartons wherever possible. If something's really heavy, like a big sand unit or a big UPS, get a wheeled freight dolly to move that thing. Don't try to, you know, hurt your back. You know, if you hurt your back especially, you drive up the cost of business, and that can affect your competitiveness in being able to submit bids. There is a procedure called team lift where you have two people to lift something that's really heavy. If you do a lot of lifting, wear a back brace. And more important than anything else, know your personal lift limit. If something's too heavy and you know you can't lift it, don't hurt yourself trying. Get someone else to help you or to move it for you. In an environmental incident, make sure you know who to contact if there's an injury to people or equipment. This becomes especially important if you end up working after hours somewhere, or you're helping someone after hours. Know how to reach an outside phone line to call 911 in a case of a serious emergency. I always keep my cell phone handy, but if you're not able to do that or you're in an area where your cell phone doesn't work, make sure you know what the code to get an outside line is in case you need to call 911. Review the procedures for cleaning up chemical spills. Have the MSDS information available for the computer-related supplies. And write up the incident in a professional manner. You're going to need to note the time, the place, who was involved, and any other important information. This becomes especially important if it's an after-hours event because, you may end up going to court over this, so you need to make sure you've got everything in order and you've documented everything properly. And work with any other personnel to solve problems resulting. Finally, learn from that incident and try to avoid any future problems. So that is a quick rundown. Some things you should have learned here: what an MSDS sheet is, why electrostatic discharge is dangerous, what to do about ESD. I'm sure you can all identify an anesthetic bag and what components of a printer could cause injury. So that is a rundown of Chapter 17. Chapter 18 is about troubleshooting, communications, and professional behavior. And much like 17, a lot of this stuff is common sense, but you are going to see a few questions about it on the A+ exam. Reasons they've included this section are that a lot of people who get A+ will either work for a company that does computer work for other companies, or you may go into business yourself. So making sure that you understand some of the professionalism needed is important. So the objectives: we're going to go over the troubleshooting methods. We're going to talk about whether the problem's software or hardware, where to go for more info, hardware and software tools, and professional behavior. So things that you need to do is learn as much from the client that you're working with as possible. You really have to listen to what they're saying, because a lot of time they're going to give you information that you don't need. And that is not because they're trying to waste your time. It's because, honestly, in most cases, if you've been called in to fix the problem, they have no idea what they're doing, and they don't know what kind of information you need. So learn as much as possible from the interview. Evaluate their environment. Use testing and reporting software to gather information about the system. Run some tests through and see what you can find on it. Then form a hypothesis. Then use the troubleshooting cycle, which we've talked about, the 6-step process, to isolate and solve the problem. Just as a reminder, because you are going to see this on the A+ test, the troubleshooting process is identify the problem, establish a theory of probable cause, test the theory, establish a plan of action to resolve the problem, verify system functionality, and if applicable, implement preventative measures, and then finally document your findings, actions, and outcome. So when you are interviewing the client, what you might do is ask them some questions. What hardware or software appears to have the problem? What other hardware or software was in use at the time of the problem? What specific task were they trying to perform when the problem happened? Is the hardware or software local, or is it accessed over the network? Check to see if the network is working in that case. Where did the specific problems occur? Are there beep messages? Was there any noises? This is a hard one because often a client will say a window popped up on the screen, and you'll say, well, what did the window say? And they'll say, I don't know. So you have to kind of try to get them to maybe repeat the problem for you. That's a big one. Can it be reproduced? Try to reproduce the problem at the customer site. Does the problem repeat itself with different hardware or software, or does it go away with different hardware and software? If it's a problem with Word and a template, for example, on their computer, try the template on another computer. See if it works there. Use clear, concise, and direct statements. Clients are going to appreciate it when you use language they can understand. And that is very important. I mean, you know, they're frustrated because whatever device it is isn't working. But try to be very clear and, you know, and talk to them in a way they can understand what you're saying. Allow them to complete their statements or thoughts, just in case they have vital information that you may have not heard. Clarify customer statements. Whether you think you understand what they said or not, make sure to ask the questions that will keep you on the right track. Try rephrasing what they say to make sure that, you know, they're saying it in a way that you understand and they understand. And then the biggest one, in most cases, you're working with the public that are not technical people. Try to avoid technical babble. All of these abbreviations and acronyms and things that I have taught y'all over this course, don't use with the customer. They're for you to know. It's not their job to have to know them. And if it is something you need to explain to them, like if the RAM in their computer is a problem, you may have to explain to them what RAM is. So be prepared to try to explain some of these terms in ways that are very clear and that'll be easy for you know, a customer who is not a computer person to understand. We can use the printer example here. If the fuser in their laser printer is a problem, you're going to probably have to explain to them what a fuser does and why that is important to the printing process. Other things to evaluate their environment. Look for power issues, look for interference issues with EMI and RFI. Listen to if the computer boots up with an error, look for the beep codes. Other things, see if there's problems with Windows, you can turn the boot log option on. If it's an I/O port issue, you might connect Loopback Party or run some third-party diagnostics. If it's a hardware device driver, you can always look in the device manager in Windows. And then try to determine if the problem is caused by hardware or software. The client interview will be the starting point, but then they will help to, you know, it'll help you to look at the Windows subsystem to see what's being checked. Windows subsystems, by the way, include the printing subsystem, display, audio, mouse and pointing devices, the keyboard. That's kind of in the same subsystem with mouse and pointing devices. Windows calls that human interface devices now. Storage, that's going to be your hard drives, the power, the RAM, and then the network. After you've done the client interview, back up the customer data. Remember, if you lose their data, you're going to be the one at fault, so make sure you've got a backup of their most important stuff. Find the most likely cause. Record the current configuration of whatever subsystem. You know, if you think it is a device issue, make sure you make a kind of a snapshot of what the settings are before you change anything. Change whatever you think might be the problem one piece at a time and retest until you find the problem. And then repeat that on all suspected components and then move on to the next subsystem. So points of failure on the outside of a computer. Cannot read the DVD or the CD media. Try both the hard eject as well as the soft eject. Remember, soft eject is pushing the button with it on. If it won't pop out, turn the machine off and get a paper clip and open it up like this. And then you can push this into that little place on a CD-ROM drive, and that will force it to eject. That releases the mechanism. I do not think I've got an external CD around here. Let me look. Nope, I've got hard drives everywhere but no CDs. But you can push this into that little place below there to pop the drive out. Or to pop the little caddy out so the drive will come out. All right, so lots of times you're going to be faced with problems you've not seen before. And it's going to be up to you to figure out what to do about those problems. So one thing to do is always go to the manufacturer's website. They say on the slide need to have Adobe Reader in the latest version, available to read the technical manuals. I personally hate Adobe, but you do need a PDF reader of some kind, because a lot of these manuals for different devices, if the user's lost the manual, you can get off of the website. I use one called Nitro PDF. It's just like Adobe, but it's not as big. Anyways, though, you just need a good PDF reader. That's something to keep around. Printed manuals, if you if it's your own computer, keep those where you can get to them quickly. Users may not do that, though, so if they don't be able to, know where they're at on the internet. Many vendors will put those up. Other things you can look for, if the website is no longer around because of, a company's gone belly up or whatever. That is called an orphan component, by the way. And most of those are available on different places on the internet. They mention a couple of sites here, download.com and windrivers.com. I like one called drivers.com. But anyways, open Google and search for the device. Put in enough details and see if you can't find a driver on the internet. There are lots of third-party information sites. Tom's Hardware is one they mention here, and the Register. I like to look in the different news groups for things. Usually when I'm troubleshooting anything or trying to learn anything, Google is always my first stop. I'll open up Google and I'll do a search from there, and I'll look for people that have had the same problem maybe and see how they solved it. As you're doing this for a living, websites that you find that are particularly useful, you might want to open you a Word document, and make a list of them so that you can get to them if you ever need them. And then I would take that a step further. I keep a USB key with me. It's on my keys at all times, and it's got on it a portable PDF reader. It's got a couple of Word files that have sites that I go to get things off of, and a couple of other diagnostic tools. And I keep that with me so that if I go somewhere to work on a computer, try to help somebody, I can just plug it in and run it on their machine if I didn't bring my own laptop with me. Here are some other ones they mention. Hardware, Burn-It-In Test Professional. There's plenty of free Burn-It-In tools. And the term Burn-It-In is kind of an old layaround from what they actually used to do to computers. To make sure that a computer could handle an environment, they would run a program on a computer that would make the CPU max out, and then they ran these computers in these rooms that were what they called hot rooms, where the temperature was like 95 to 100 degrees, and if the computer didn't melt, then it basically passed the test. And the way they would max out the CPU on these was by doing this program called the Tower of Hanoi. And basically, it's kind of interesting. It is a mathematical formula to solve a puzzle of moving circles from one line to another. And you can never stack a larger circle on top of a smaller one. So mathematically, to move those things, you have to move one and then move it back and all kinds of things. But the formula to solve that is something that would push the CPUs. So they would just have the computer solve that over and over and over again to burn it in. Something you may have if you're working with older computers, you might get what's called a postcard. And this is a card that you can put in a computer that's got a little screen on it, and the little screen will show numbers or give information if the computer fails during boot. So it's a way to get information if a computer doesn't have a speaker, for example, and can't give you a post error. Something else you should probably keep in your toolkit is some blank media for transferring drivers from one machine to another. Keep an empty USB key around, because you never know if someone's problem is their network card driver. Well, you can't get on the internet and download the network card driver on the machine with a bad network card. And then virus scanning software. I always keep a virus scanner on my USB key, and I run it on everybody's machine that I do anything on at all. Other things you might keep as part of your toolkit. Compressed air is great to clean the junk out of power supply fans and other fans. A keyboard puller, if you're going to clean a keyboard maybe. I do not personally have one of those. I'm under the line of thought that keyboards are pretty cheap these days. If it gets that dirty, just replace it. You might have a computer mini vacuum. I do not have one of those. I use compressed air for everything. But they do make little vacuum cleaners that you can clean keyboards and such with. A wire cutter and a stripper is a good thing to have around. Extra cases, I do not keep an extra case, but I do keep drive screws and extra card slot covers around. And then hard disk and motherboard jumper blocks, those are great to keep around. That's the little jumpers, you know, that are on the back of a drive to move it. Anesthetic cleaning wipes. And then I keep an assortment of cables. I keep a SATA cable and an IDE cable in my case all the time, in my toolkit, so that I'll have it, you know, if I need it for something. So to clean things, they say anesthetic electronic wipes are great for the cases and glass surfaces. For glass surface cleaners, you can use things like Indust, or, you know, with any spray cleaner, be careful. Spray it on the cloth and never on the device. We talked about that a minute ago. Isoproyl alcohol is good to keep around for cleaning tape drive heads, floppy disk heads, and keyboards. If you're in an environment that still uses floppies, it might be good, especially if it's a dirty environment, for you to get a floppy head cleaner. And I do not have one anymore because I don't have any floppies anymore. But basically, it's a floppy disk that's got a inside where the magnetic media would usually be. It's got like a cotton ring, and you put alcohol on that ring, and then you put the disk in, and you make the drive do some operation. And it's of course going to fail because it can't write to it. But when it tries to do that, when it moves it, it cleans, it gets that alcohol in there, and it'll clean the drive read-write heads. So, okay, we've already talked a little about professional behavior, but maintain a positive can-do attitude. That's important. You know, avoid defensive words. Don't argue with them. Even if it's their fault and they've done something stupid, don't tell them that, especially if you're contracted to come in, because if you make them feel stupid, they're not going to call you again to come back to help with other problems. Don't minimize their problems. Even though, you know, it may seem like something that's minimal to you, it may be the end of the world to them. They don't know if what they've done or, you know, what's happened to their computer is a tiny error or something very large. Avoid being judgmental. Even if it's their fault, you know, try to avoid passing blame. And stay focused. Avoid distractions that can keep you from the job at hand. You know, you shouldn't be talking on your cell phone if you're billing this client by the hour. And try to minimize the interaction with other people unrelated to the job. So, how to treat customers' property. Don't use customer equipment for personal tasks. Don't make phone calls on their phone, for example. Don't go poking around on their hard disk unless it's necessary to solve the problem. Alright, so don't go poking around their hard drives, you know, unless it's necessary to solve the problem. Don't test their printer by printing personal information. You know, don't use their printer to print your resume, or they say here, a pinup of your favorite movie star. If you need to change the resolution on the monitor for testing, change it back when you're done. If, for example, a big one, if the customer's left-handed and they've got their mouse set in left-hand mode, make sure that you change it back. You know, if you change it to right-hand mode to do something, change it back so that they don't have to do that. You know, leave their computer in the situation it was in before you started, other than fixing the problem. Basically, all of this is because you don't want to make them sorry they called on you or your company for help. You want them to use you in the future for other problems. So, the rules of customer engagement. There are 5 of them. The first rule is listen and ask good questions. The second rule, drop the arrogance. The third rule, focus on the problem at hand. The fourth rule, don't bite the customer's bait. And the fifth rule, respect people's space and property. So these are all pretty common. Here's an example. Tom is installing a new patch for the client access side of the company's proprietary database. After installing the patch, he reboots the PC and gets a blue screen with cryptic error code. At this point, he does not know whether to reboot to a previous config or uninstall. The client in this case is a data entry clerk for the database. If it's not finished by 5:30, the customer is attempting to order services via the web will not have access in overnight hours. This costs the company $8,000 an hour. What should he do? So kind of think about that, and think about the other things we said in this chapter with professionalism being the big thing. And that is a summary of Chapter 18. With that, we have completed all of the A+ course. The big thing for you all now is to study for this test. Do the exam crams. Do as many as you can. Remember, the questions on that are more like what you're actually going to see on the actual test. Be sure you have done your chapter quizzes. Those will, be graded for credit in the course. And be sure that if you have any questions or anything to let me know. Thanks for watching, everyone.